Alright, so today I want to show you how to make some of the best champagne combinations in ball pythons. And when it comes to the champagne, it can be a little bit tricky. It's really visually dominant as far as the patterns. A lot of times when you work other genes into the champagne, you end up with a completely patternless ball python. As a matter of fact, if you're going for the patternless ball pythons, you can use champagne to make some really amazing patternless combinations. But if you're working with champagne and you want to bring some pattern and really mix things up, it really takes the right genes mixed in with champagne. There are some things where you can make some really crazy mixed up patterns that break through the champagne. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you how to make some really amazing combinations using the champagne ball python. Alright, so I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the champagne just by itself without any other genes in the mix. This is what a champagne looks like. And when it comes to the champagne, I'd say it's really visually dominant as far as reducing a lot of the pattern, pretty much wiping out most of the pattern on the sides of the ball python. Sometimes you'll actually see almost all the pattern right on the top of your champagne and your champagne combinations. A lot of times you'll actually work really strong pattern enhancing genes into the mix like the DJI or the leopard, and a lot of times it'll completely wipe out even the strongest pattern enhancing genes and you're left with just pattern on the top or no pattern at all. Sometimes you can get a completely patternless champagne combination. And kind of on the flip side, you can think about visual dominance in a couple ways. You can think about it as far as reducing the pattern in your combinations, or you can think about it as far as transferring the color of the gene into a lot of combinations. And I actually pulled up the banana. Take a look at this. This is like another really visually dominant gene, except it's completely opposite than the champagne. So this is really visually dominant. So if you actually work banana into other genes, you end up with a really banana colored snake, but the banana allows all the other patterns from all the other genes to break through, which is completely opposite of the champagne. So if you actually take the banana and you work it into the champagne, take a look at this combination. This is a really crazy looking snake. This is probably one of my favorite combinations with the banana and the champagne. It's almost completely patternless. You can actually see just a little bit right on the top of the snake, just a little bit of a solid line turning into like a dotted line, almost completely patternless. And you can see the visual dominance of the banana really breaking through as far as the color, bringing it into this combination. And the champagne, really, you can definitely tell the visual dominance as far as wiping out all the pattern in the combination. So you can actually take this and go one step further and bring out a lot of the pattern and some more colors from some of these other genes, working another gene into the mix. And pretty much the number one gene that works the best, bringing out a lot of pattern in a lot of your champagne combos, is the leopard. This is what a leopard looks like. And typically when you think of the leopard, you think of a dark gene. The leopard can really darken the background of a lot of combinations and it really jumbles up the pattern. But kind of the interesting thing about the leopard is when you work it into the champagne or the ivory, which is another, the ivory is actually a super yellow belly, which is a completely white snake that masks all the other genes. And there's only one gene that can break through the ivory, and that is the leopard. It's kind of interesting that the leopard breaks through the ivory and it breaks through the champagne as far as bringing out a lot of patterns. And kind of the interesting thing is when you actually add leopard to the mix on either one of those genes, it'll not only bring out the pattern from the leopard, but it'll also bring out some of the pattern and the color from a lot of your other genes. It's like leopard is the key for working it into the champagne or the ivory. It's a really interesting gene. So here's what happens if you actually take leopard and work it into the banana champagne. Take a look at this. This is, as a matter of fact, this was kind of surprising when I kind of stumbled into this for the first time. You know, the leopard bringing out all this amazing color and pattern in a lot of your champagne combinations. And you can actually see, if you actually look at this one, usually the bananas will have a lot of oranges. You can see some oranges coming out from the banana, and you can see some purples coming from the banana, which is pretty unusual that you'd see not only the color but the pattern from the banana using leopard to bring it out. It's pretty amazing. So take a look at this crazy snake. This one is really, this is one of the craziest champagne combinations I've seen. This is actually the combination of the Enchi and the leopard in with the champagne. So if you actually take a look at the ivory, the super yellow belly, the all white snake, pretty much the only one gene that'll bring out, the kind of break through the ivory is the leopard. And you can add Enchi to a lesser degree. I've actually seen some Enchi ivories where a little bit of the pattern kind of comes breaking through the ivory, the all white snake, by using Enchi. But it seems like it's completely opposite when you add Enchi to the champagne. It has a really strong effect as far as bringing out a lot of the patterns in the snake. And if you actually add it with the leopard, both of them really bring out a lot of this crazy pattern. This is a really amazing snake. I can't even believe it. And take a look at this. This is actually another gene that you can actually work in there. You can actually, instead of just one copy of the Enchi, you can use 2 copies of the Enchi to really bring a lot of pattern through the champagne. So this is the super Enchi, and it's kind of interesting if you actually double up some of these genes. Sometimes you can have a really dramatic effect. And essentially what the Enchi does is the Enchi really reduces the pattern, kind of gives you more of a reduced, almost like a banded kind of a pattern in a lot of combinations. If you actually do the super Enchi, sometimes you'll actually get a snake that looks like this. Sometimes with the super Enchis though, you'll actually get sometimes hardly any pattern at all with the super Enchi. It really depends on the line of the super Enchi that you're actually working with. So here's what happens if you take super Enchi and you work it into the champagne. Take a look at this. So this is a little bit different than the Enchi leopard champagne, because you can actually see it has a little bit more reduced of a pattern, where if you actually have the Enchi leopard combination, it really scrambles up the pattern and gives you a little bit more kind of a scramble of pattern, brings through a little bit more. But take a look at this. You can actually take the super Enchi champagne and add other genes to the mix and really make some amazing combinations using any of these as a base starting point. So take a look at this. You can actually take the super Enchi and add in Orange Dream. Take a look at this crazy thing. It seems like anything with Enchi or leopard or super Enchi, and then you add other genes on top of it, you can really take those and make some amazing combinations, because it draws all the other genes through and brings in a lot of pattern in a lot of your champagne combinations. So here's something else completely different that you can do with your champagne. You can actually work it into pied, and pied is pretty interesting. This is actually a recessive mutation. You need 2 copies of the pied for a visual. And essentially what the pied does is it brings out these big patches of white all through the snake. Sometimes it can be kind of random. Sometimes you can have a lot of white, and sometimes you can have just a little white. And kind of the interesting thing between the pied and the champagne is you can actually take the champagne, have 1 copy of the pied, a champagne head pied, and it'll look like a visual pied. So it's a weird effect. I can't really explain. I've never seen it in any other gene. So if you actually take a champagne, you breed it to pied, essentially what you get is you get half of them would be het pied without the champagne, half of them would be champagne het pieds. And take a look at what a champagne het pied looks like. It looks like a visual pied. Pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, I think some people kind of get tricked. You know, they're breeding champagnes and hets together, then they produce something like this, and you could be tricked into thinking you actually hit the visual pied instead of just the het pied. This is pretty amazing. And you can actually add other genes into this to kind of change the color of the champagne. The champagne really pretty much wipes out all the pattern in the dark places, and then you add other genes. You can add, like, I could imagine you could probably add, like, you know, Orange Dream or something like this, and really bring it out and make some really amazing, it's kind of like a pseudo pied, because keep in mind this just has 1 copy of the pied. It's not actually a true pied with 2 copies of the pied. As a matter of fact, if you actually made the true pied with the champagne, so for example, you can actually take this and work 1 more copy of the pied gene into it, make the visual champagne pied. Take a look at what this looks like. It is a completely white snake, which is kind of interesting. And most of these champagne pies over here at Morphmarket are completely white. Every now and then you'll actually see one, maybe maybe with a little bit of color just on the tail. And keep in mind, if you actually are working on this project, you can't really take two champagne pieds or champagne het pieds and breed them together, because the super champagne is a lethal combination. So you probably want to take like a champagne het pied and breed it to either a visual pied or a het to actually get the champagne pied with two copies of the gene. You definitely want to avoid breeding two champagnes together. So here's another project that is pretty awesome. As a matter of fact, if I was getting into champagne, this is probably the first thing that I would go to, working champagne into the super cinnamon. And the super cinnamons can vary quite a bit. I've actually seen some that are really super jet black, like a really black. This one is kind of unusual. It's almost like a steel gray. It's really the first steel gray super cinnamon I've seen. Most of them are either really jet black or they have more of a coppery colored brown color to them. So the super cinnamon actually has two copies of the cinnamon, so it's a little bit trickier to work those two genes into the champagne. But if you actually do make the super cinnamon champagne, this is what you get. You get a gray matter. Take a look at this. This is kind of unusual too. This is actually a pied looking snake, even though there's no pied, not even one copy of the recessive pied gene. And for some reason, I just can't explain why some of these genes come together and make some of these visual effects. It's kind of weird. It's kind of unexpected. As a matter of fact, if you're doing like groundbreaking work, working on the champagne, trying to work it through these genes, the first people that did it, they're probably scratching their head thinking, I wonder if pied was actually kind of floating around in my collection to make something like this. But it's just a combination of the super cinnamon and the champagne, which is kind of interesting. I always wondered if you could actually do the same thing with the super black pastel, because the super cinnamon and the super black pastel are pretty much the same. They're actually allelic. I haven't actually looked it up. It'd be interesting to actually look up to see if you can make I guess it would be like a black gray matter using the black pastel instead of the cinnamon, which would be kind of interesting. This one actually has pastel in the mix. So a lot of times when you work pastel into the gray matters, essentially what that does is if you actually have a gray matter, it's almost like a metallic colored silver in the gray matters, and then when you add pastel, it turns into like a metallic brown, almost like a bronze color in some of these combinations. It's pretty amazing to actually see some of these in person, and these are really expensive too. I haven't actually looked at the price on this one. This one actually sold for $1,000. Pretty amazing. So here's the last one I wanted to show you. This is kind of an interesting combination. This is the GHI, which is a dark gene, and this is a really strong pattern enhancing gene, and if you actually work it into the champagne, you end up with a patternless snake. But kind of the cool thing is the effect that the GHI has on the champagne when you actually mix them together. So here's what happens if you work GHI into the champagne. You end up with a bright gold snake, which is kind of crazy. And I was actually looking at a bunch of these over here on Morphmarket, and some of them are really super bright gold and some of them aren't that gold. But I'd say as far as gold snakes, this is probably the brightest gold. This is probably even brighter gold than some of the pinstripes and spiders that I've seen. Pretty amazing combination. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Nathaniel Patrick asks, do ball pythons need misting every day? And that is a very good question. So when it comes to ball pythons and humidity, it really depends on what your ambient conditions are as far as humidity. So if you actually live in the tropics where you have 90% humidity, let me tell you, you don't have to worry about misting your ball pythons probably ever. It's pretty much an ideal situation. But if you actually live in a really dry climate, like here in Colorado, the ambient humidity here in my reptile room is usually like 15% or lower. I've pretty much given up on trying to humidify this room. As a matter of fact, I actually tried it once. I had a humidifier and I was going through like 4 gallons of water every single day. I mean, to really do it here in my reptile room, to bring it up to like 60%, I'd say is pretty much the average for ball pythons. I'd pretty much have to have a humidifier plumbed into the water system to keep the humidity really high. I pretty much gave up with that, and I control the humidity in my tubs. And if you actually had like a paper substrate or something that didn't hold a lot of of moisture, I'd say you probably have to go in and mist your ball pythons maybe every other day, maybe every day, depending on how dry it is and how much your tub can actually retain that humidity. But what I actually like to do is I actually use a coconut husk chip substrate, which is pretty much ideal for my conditions here in my reptile room, because I can actually have like 2 or 3 inches of coconut husk on the bottom of my tubs. And what that lets me do, I can actually go in, I actually use a little watering can like I use for watering plants, and I water all my snake tubs. It's really quick and easy, and that water goes into my coconut husk and really puts a lot of moisture in the bottom of the coconut husk, leaving the top of it dry so the snake can slither around on a dry substrate on top, but it has a lot of the moisture underneath. And what that does, it slowly releases the humidity in the tub over a period of, I'd say, maybe 3 or 4 days, sometimes maybe 5 days, depending on the humidity at any point in time. Sometimes the humidity can fluctuate a little bit, but that is pretty much the ideal thing, where you're not in there misting every single day. I've actually seen some people do foggers. You can actually do that and have like a fogger on like an automatic controller to precisely control the humidity. That would be a good idea too. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.